been about 10 years, and this whole property here was Jaeger's piggery. Well, most of you probably know there was Robert and myself ended up securing the property. I got an option from the owners and we bought the property, and we've subsequently split, and so we now have this piece here, that piece there, and you can see this is Hayter's Hill Reserve here, and Hayter's Hill Reserve is the last piece of intact remnant rainforest closest to the most easterly point. This is Old Bangalow Road, the road that joins Suffolk Park to Bangalow, and you could see here is the railway line, and the railway line actually borders the property here, and so when they turn that into a cycle walk track or light rail, we'll create like a little station there so that people can get off and come down, walk down here, meander. This will be terraced gardens, and come down into our main area. As you can see, this was presented to council in 2007, and it says Earthseed Gardens, and essentially botanical gardens, education facility based around plants, and the local economic hub, as you'll see, is a whole bunch of businesses that are basically fostered specifically, that are in alignment with the garden and what we want to do. So maybe an essential oil company making liquid fertilizers, healthcare products from plants. You know, there's a wide range of possibilities, like Starseed chili sauce, for example. The environmentally integrated ecological restoration was simply that, this being quite a sensitive area, part of our proposal was to somehow create a corridor across the front here, linking this piece of land here, which is woodlands, to here, which we no longer border, but we can still link this one here all the way across to there. So eventually, you know, as much as we can, plan out a corridor that links around with the neighbours in front there. Habitable gardens is really a concept that's very old and yet quite new to modern, I guess, modern Western societies. And the idea is that it's a kind of the rediscovery of it was permaculture, and the idea is that if you just plant a garden, you know, very quickly it's going to be overrun by animals wanting to eat it, and so living in close proximity to the garden, there's a level of economics of energy, and so there's zones of planting where you're going to access the plants most. They're going to be closer to where you're living, and then further out there'll be orchards and animals, and it's designed really to become efficient so that it can be managed by by one person or a very small group of people. Essentially, the idea was to create the optimum space in a garden type setting for people to go through an evolutionary process. First of all, coming to terms and connecting with who they were personally, but then connecting with nature, and connecting with nature in a particular way so that there was actually a living in and with nature, and to prove through showcasing all these ideas that humans could actually live in a natural ecosystem, and it would be better for the environment, better for biodiversity, better for the habitat, better for the water and the air, and for the people all at the same time. Because often what we've found is it's beneficial to humans, but at the loss of habitat, or, you know, there's someone wins and someone loses, and sometimes that's people, and sometimes, and most often, it's the environment. But as you can see, we've got to a point in our history where the whole planetary ecosphere is actually in jeopardy, and so this is very crucial for this time. So what's kind of evolved from here is really the heart being the education facility. This plan obviously has shifted somewhat because our current land ends here, and goes all, this is it here. So even though it takes in all the infrastructure, this will no longer be executed in that particular way. This bottom paddock is probably going to be more for like a miniature broadacre farming, and the current dam that's here is going to be extended. This wall will be there, and there'll be another little body of water here, and this is a conference centre. This is the planned wellness and integrated wellness centre. This is potentially live work studios. This is the nursery here and the tea house, and this is the shed here. And the proposed cafe on the water, or surrounded by water, which I'm going to go into later. This shed here looks like it may be the best shed to have all our student accommodation in. And this shed here looks like it will have facilitators and teachers and staff, along with some of the other sheds. And then potentially in the future, this will be the site of a show kind of eco village. And right along the ridge there'll probably be rainforest plantings. So that was a view in 2007. That's the Riviera there. There was going to be a little bit of terracing going down there. So those live work studios were actually called Dream Seed Studios. And the garden centre nursery was called Jungle Seed. And that was called Grove Tea House. But of course that became the tea house, and this is now going to be like a cafe. There was the Threshold Exhibition Centre. This is Lotus Seed Wellness Centre, which would be on the water. And then Cabin Bar Conference Centre, which would also be on the water. So here's that big fig tree and the current there's permaculture gardens there. So here's the Riviera again. And this is like a cutaway drawing of the giant shed. So it has a stepped roof, the roof instead of, that's the original roof there, as you can see. And so instead of that, there's two kicked up roofs, so it overlooks that body of water, the Riviera. And then so there's maybe 6 or 8 little live work studios in the front. And you can see there's the working space below and a living space above. And then each one will have like a big glass frontage looking onto the Riviera and their own like little garden. And then there'll still be a walk/driveway right through the middle of the shed. And then the back tier would be, again, live work studios, with the proposal that this shed at that stage was proposed to be a garden with parking. This is kind of the proposal for the this Grove juice bar, tea house, and cafe. So there's decks round the bamboo and through the centre of the bamboo. I planted originally that row of trees that comes down there, which is African sausage tree, like an avenue, so you can walk down into this space here. And then this wall, there's a proposal to pull the wall down so that it's at the water level. And then, as you could see, the proposal would be to build a deck out on these existing piers, a walkway, a covered walkway. And then right at the end there would be a big round deck, like a kind of yoga deck space. And so this is kind of a little rendition of what the space would look like. And there would also be between 6 and 8 floating tables. So there'd be a raft with just a roof, and people would get their food and just float out, and when they finish they just wind their way back. So, kind of fun. And there was also another idea, which we may still do, which is to have a wall with these tables and chairs sunken, so that the water's actually eye level, and it would be lit up at night with underwater lights, so you could see the lotus and the fish, and of course by then the water would be really clear. And this guy here is lounging on that would be the deck of the wellness centre. So that's a little bit more kind of pulling back, and so you could see there's that cafe. That's the integrated wellness center on the water, but this is also the conference center here on the water, and we took it like based on that sort of thing there, but it would all be existing here, here, and here. So this document was produced for council specifically to let them know what we were doing, and to also they were writing up the new LEP, which is now coming into effect in July. And so it was to include us in a very specific way in that plan, and also to let state government know that there was probably going to be about 60 people. What's that? 60 people employed. LEP is Local Environment Plan. Okay. But it's a planning document which outlines all the regulations, like the state regulations of what you can do in what zone. Yeah. And so there have been some changes, and we've kind of been updated in terms of what our zoning was from rural 1A to 2RU or something, which has different things that are allowable. It's a little more liberal than what was before. So what we're planning on doing in a general sense is, with this DA, we're going to promote the idea to council, which reverses their set ideas, which is their planning instruments are to limit the amount of development on the land, because they recognize that when people live on the land, there's a certain amount of impact, negative impact. And so their planning instruments, their town planning, has been to concentrate people into suburbs where they're all quite tightly together. The rest is left, as environmentally intact as possible, and concentrate the services like sewage, garbage collection, roads. And that's all based on the idea that humans living on the land have a negative impact on the environment. What we're going to show is that there is a way. There's always been a way if you are hunter-gatherers, but there is a way, a modern way of living in the landscape that has a positive footprint. So the houses, or the small community in general, will produce more energy than it uses, will grow more food than it consumes. The water leaving, the wastewater, will be better quality in most instances than coming in. The air will be better. There'll be more biodiversity and an increased level of soil fertility over time. So for us to demonstrate and show that and teach that as a school, we're going to build a model village and a model reuse of these existing spaces to show that that can be done, and at the same time create a whole bunch of opportunities from a business incubator point of view that will actually be synergistic not only with the project, but to show that on this particular piece of land we can have a positive impact on all those areas, including creating a local economy locally at Starseed and locally in Byron Shire. So that's essentially what the school wants to display and promote. As a piggery, this was designed and I think had about 5,000 pigs. And that's equivalent to something like 15,000 people in terms of shit.
Really?
And so they treated all that through these wastewater ponds. Yeah. Okay. What we plan to do, because part of what we're going to be teaching is we're going to show the difference of composting to biogas digesters to our existing wastewater system, which is a septic tank. And we're going to show the pros and cons of those three main models, and of course there could be others. So in terms of composting, it's pretty easy, it's pretty functional. There's now quite modern composting systems, and we'll set one up so that not only can students see, but people can come and experience that. And there's different ways afterwards that gets processed. No, we're going to probably be one of the few, I'll use the word liberally, developments where we'll probably have a bigger capacity for shit than we'll have people, just because of the demonstration. Our septic tanks there should be able to handle at peak about 150 people, but for short periods, but should be able to handle about 60 to 80 people as they are. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's providing they're managed in a particular way. And we're learning more about that now because we did have a washing machine going into there,
Yeah.
and we did have not as tighter controls over the shower and what soaps people were using. And so we've just had it cleaned out and restarting, and so it should function better. But the biogas digesters, which are actually quite large scale, what they do is they're producing methane gas, which will be able to be used for cooking. And if there's enough people, we can actually use it for heating and lighting. But at the same time, we get liquid fertilizer, so liquid manure as well. And so there'll be like a green water system after that. So it goes into various tanks with different levels of plants, pulling out nutrients, and then we'll compost those plants as they go. And so by the time the water comes out, it's actually meant to be drinkable. You can then pass it through like a UV sterilization and biochar, which we'll be making on site, and get it to drinking water quality. But along with that, we do have town water, and we also have an amazing network of springs which we're about to tap and use in the system. Traffic, which is the next big question council is probably going to be interested in. We're wonderfully blessed by having, as I pointed out earlier, we're on the actual railway, the railway line. And so the railway line is a hot debate whether it's about to be opened for a walking and cycling track, but as well as that, the potential of light rail. Now I know Simon Richardson, our mayor, is pushing for light rail, but either way, if light rail is going to be the go, we're going to petition for a siding up at the top there. But if it's a cycle walkway, it'll be easy, and we'll build a little, like a welcome building there, and like enabling people to stop and get some organic juices and buy a little bit of jam and chili sauce on their way to Bangalore, kind of thing. And so that's one lot of access. Of course, the road's been upgraded since the power station, substation, and what we thought would be a good idea was to offer a minibus which would go into town backwards and forwards, but this would be an electric shuttle bus. The other thing is would work out a way to offer people bicycles, which any student starting would be able to have access to a bicycle. And there's an amazing bicycle project I'd love to hook up with, which making bicycles out of bamboo, and possibly run workshops on that. But the other thing is any students who are studying here for over a year will actually get an electric bicycle as part of their tuition fees, and we'll build a big solar charge station, so they'll come in and every evening they'll plug in their battery and charge up, and be able to ride to town and back under electric bike. And so that's one of the ways in which we're going to be addressing council asking us about traffic. Of course, there's still going to be increased traffic with educators and the odd student who has a car. However, what we'll do is have a positive encouragement and discouragement program. So if you park a car, each time you park in a parking for the day, you would have to buy a rainforest tree, and if you've got a large vehicle like an SUV, you may have to buy a fruit tree. So the parking will actually be between $4 and $10, but you're actually getting a tree for that. So it's kind of like a parking fee. So if you don't park, you get and you ride, you get all sorts of incentives and possible services. So you get a free juice, free tea, because you've right. So we're going to actively encourage people getting out here by walking and riding, and discourage them by driving. How we're going to be honouring traditional cultures and traditional wisdom by growing the plants here, and then inviting teachers from around the world to come and teach how they use their plants for food, for medicine, for shelter, for fuel, and really to integrate that into a modern context, so people learning those skills can then take them home to their communities and apply that in their communities, it's going to be like a type of best practice cookie cutter model. We're going to explore the dynamics of how best to do this, and you could then unfold that into any climate range or any ecosystem. This is a little bit about an outline for the school curriculum. And so it says phytocultural education facility and botanical green school and temple garden. And so we've settled, I think, on the name of Earth School. This is kind of one of the images that we've chosen, which this is in one of the wettest parts in India. It's called Meghalaya. And this is a living bridge. This is a fig tree that's grown, and they slowly, over 25 to 50 years, tease the roots to grow across, and then they create these living bridges, and they carry there's rocks and all sorts of things. This is a proper bridge. That image is kind of really analogically captures what we're trying to do, which is create a living bridge from our traditional ancestral wisdoms of the past to the future, bypassing a lot of the ecological destruction that's occurred, which is probably over here. And for each of us personally to build these living bridges within ourselves to our highest potential, but also Starseed as a general project, which is to showcase these best practice systems, taking all the traditional wisdom, but then adding our modern spin to that. So it'll enable us as an education facility to run classes, and at the same time people can be studying in Chile or Singapore or China, being online and being able to ask the educators questions live, and then all that information being archived. And so what it gives us is a really interesting dynamic. So when we're running conferences or any educational programs, it allows it to be accessed by anyone in the world. And we want to have different sectors, so certain people in certain parts of the world will be able to have that absolutely free, and then other people in more developed world will be paying, and so there'll be a kind of a distribution, an equitable economic forum, or I guess playing field that we can level. So I'll talk a little bit more about the education facility here. Essentially, what we're going to be looking at is plants and how we can communicate with plants in a very particular way, because plants are the beings that are trapping sunlight and turning them into complex sugars, and it's those complex sugars that are building our food, our medicine, our building material, our fiber, our fuel, and of course trees and plants at the same time are filtering the water and filtering the air and looking beautiful all at the same time. So pretty amazing. And so one of the bases of what we'd like to learn ourselves and teach is a dynamic communication method, which broadly is called kinesiology, but that's just the interface tool. So we'd like to teach people to be able to communicate directly with the natural world. And this will bypass the scientific method and allow people to use a level of intuition, but also a very well-developed level of kinesiology, that we're going to develop a special course so that it will enable people to ask plants questions like, is this the appropriate place to plant this plant? Does it require this type of fertilizer? Does it require more shade or more sun? And so it will encourage that dynamic. And so the way the school's set up is that for the people learning how to grow their own food, not only will they learn, you know, from seed to plate, so that's propagation, selecting different types of soils, how to treat the soils, how to grow living soils, but it'll culminate in that produce ending up in our little cafe on the Lotus Lake. And so what it'll mean is that interface is for the public then to come and experience the organic food grown here by those students and then even prepared by those students. So the cafe is essentially a classroom. And the same with the Integrated Wellness Centre. The Integrated Wellness Centre is going to be where the students who here are learning about plants as medicine, whether it's Chinese medicine or Ayurveda or Amazonian plants or plants from Europe, whether it's a nettle, they'll learn the healing qualities of that, how to make tinctures, how to make extractions, essential oils in certain places. But where it will culminate into is this integrated wellness centres. So all the incredible alternative or complementary medicinal practitioners in the area will get to come in and teach their healing modalities, but with the plants that people can see actually growing here and being prepared here for herbs. And so it'll give people the opportunity to come in and maybe do a juice fast if they want to have a different way of trying to heal their cancer. And at the same time access our beautiful living water spas. So we'll tap all these incredible springs and not only produce super high quality drinking water that we will not only clear with our technology, which is initially just charcoals and filtering the water, but then onto water energizing through magnetic and all sorts of spiral technologies that exist, and create living water that you can actually bathe in. So our spa is part of our living water treatment, and then it'll be a little bit like the traditional Japanese onsens, where you can actually sit in a hot bath and put the herbs in the bath and absorb them through your skin as opposed to taking them internally. And so whether we're talking about the conference center where people are going to come and talk about things like living soil, like how to bring water back to life, or how to do bioarchitecture and bio building, all of those conferences will be yearly events, and it will enable us not only to have the best people in the area and Australia coming to present their latest products. For example, the Biobuilding Conference won't just cover building with hemp and bamboo and mud bricks and using bacteria to grow sandstone. It will actually also cover biogas digesters and wastewater systems. It will cover things like internal gardens used for air purification and heating. It will cover all sorts of passive solar design and energy generation. So it's not just building, but the building as an integrated system in the landscape. We're also going to obviously explore within the curriculum plants' relationship to the sun, to beauty, nature's spirit, mushrooms, air and water quality, soil fertility, microorganisms, and each one of these is quite a large topic. People will get an opportunity to specialize or to do something quite broad. And we'll initially be looking at educating educators, people that can take this information back to their communities and teach this information. And this is something that's happening all around the world at the moment. We're not the only people doing it. We just happen to be living in a community in Byron Bay that over the last 40 years has actually been practicing various aspects of this alternative living. And right in these hills, permaculture was born, and yet it's probably more popular in America, which is a shame, because this is the home of permaculture, and it hasn't been claimed by Byron Shire that this is where permaculture comes from. And so we can bring all all those people's time and energy investing in exploring what alternative living is, everything from social politics in community all the way to how to live side by side with natural ecosystems to the benefit of both, and bring that into a context that's shareable. So that's kind of a nutshell. Any other any questions or other things to throw at it? I may have missed out stuff.
What time frame are you looking at for this?
Yeah, good question.
Tomorrow.
Okay, so, yes, so full day then.
Yesterday.